Welcome to the Wake Up Protocol. I am your host, Nadia Haldeman, and together we're having life-changing conversations with real people about spiritual awakening and the transformations that follow. We're mapping the messy path of awakening so you can go further faster and feel a little less alone along the way. For this week's episode of the Wake Up Protocol, I'm joined by Mónica Guzmán. She's a bridge builder, author, journalist, TEDx speaker, and the mother of two. Moni wrote the best-selling book, I Never Thought of It That Way, and is the host of the A Braver Way podcast. To me, she's one of the most vital voices of our time, helping us cross political divides to rediscover our shared humanity. A Mexican immigrant and the liberal daughter of conservative parents, Moni lives the curiosity she teaches. In this conversation, we reflect on our shared history in social media and how technology now drives what she refers to in the book as SOS, which stands for sorting, othering, and siloing. That's distancing us from one another. We explore the spiritual dawning Moni has experienced lately, a dawning that requires aiming curiosity inward to understand our own code. From the temples of Thailand to a profound moment of connection at her own wedding, we discover dropping the masks we wear to find true belonging. This episode is an invitation to let your convictions breathe and to remember that no one is beyond understanding. It's a conversation about staying human, staying curious, and meeting a divided world with an open heart.
The spiritual piece of me, I would say, has been largely asleep for a long time, and in the last 2 to 3 years has started to move. I don't know what to call it. Spiritual awakening makes sense to me, For me, it's been like a dawning, like a slow dawning, where I realize that there's more light coming in, and I like what that light is showing me. And so I want to do more things to let even more of that light come in. And what does that mean? And it turns out it doesn't mean trying to achieve more things. And it doesn't mean trying to impress more people. And it doesn't mean some of the stuff I was conditioned to think it should mean. It means something very different. And one of the core things it appears to mean is that I have to aim my curiosity within. And as much as I talk about the political divide and how scary it can be to get curious about someone on the other side, there are moments that I think it's even scarier to get curious about yourself. So that's been a journey, but such a fulfilling one.
Mónica Guzmán, welcome to the Wake Up Protocol.
Hey, Nadia, it's so good to be here with you.
Yeah, it really is. Gosh, how long has it been? 15 years since we worked together at a little social media startup?
Yep, that was 2010 when I met you.
Yeah, so exactly.
Good Lord. And it was fun to work with you, let me say. I miss it. It was a lot of fun. You taught me how to have an even better eye. And I'm really grateful to you for that.
Yeah, and the sentiment is mutual. I feel like it was a really great place to work with a lot of really interesting people who were driven and enthusiastic to innovate and to create new things. And I find it interesting that we worked together at a social media company in the very beginning of social media, before we really understood what social media was going to do to us and to our society.
Definitely. It was so much more optimistic. It felt like we were pulling back the veil on this force for good that couldn't be but that. And things got complicated after.
Yeah, things got complicated. And I remember one of the people who worked there, the CMO, she had introduced us to the concept of the infograph and the social graph, which at the time was completely new to me, and how the social media can bring people together in a social way, but it can also communicate information. And that was all before social media really influenced us in ways that we didn't even realize we're going to lose control in a way. And
yeah, exactly. And I think that's a cycle that repeats itself in so many technologies. And now there's AI, which has given me all kinds of reasons to wonder, okay, is this good or is it bad? Or can I know or should I worry? It's all over again.
Mm-hmm. It feels like we're in the beginning again, like we were with social media, but now with AI, and it feels even bigger this time. It's just adding on top of itself.
Agreed.
So at the time when we worked together, you had not written the book yet. The book that you ended up writing is called I Never Thought of It That Way. And it's a really important book for this time. As a matter of fact, I've said that to you before. I feel like you are one of the most important people of this time because you're a bridge builder and you're really trying to create connection across divide, and specifically in this country of the United States where we live, of the political divide that's happening. And that's really tearing people apart in a time where we need to come together. And of course, I see it through this astrological filter too. We're in a time where Pluto is activating Aquarius, which is all about the collective and power to the people. And so the fact that you have a voice in this is just really important right now. And I'm so grateful that you have the courage and the energy to really go out there and do that. And one of the things that from the very moment when I first met you, you always really embodied that is curiosity. And to you, curiosity is something you bring up throughout the book as well. And I'm curious, no pun intended here, what your take is on curiosity and why you feel that it is so important at this time.
Yeah, as you were talking, I was thinking about how sometimes community is easy and sometimes community is hard. But it is always important. And I would argue that the times when community feels hardest to forge and maintain are usually when it is most important that community be forged and maintained. And it's hard work. It pushes us into discomfort all the time. One of the things that makes community really hard right now with the kind of divisions and anxiety circulating through society is that a lot of us don't know how to be honest with each other at a time like this. Why? Because we're afraid. We're afraid of judgments. We're afraid that we'll encounter the kind of disagreement that may force us to do something we're uncomfortable with, question our convictions, wonder if we're abandoning our convictions in order to listen to someone else, wonder if people on our own side are judging us as we dare to ask questions. And asking questions is the thing right now. Because right now, the communities that are easy are the communities that are the same, where there's people who are like-minded. That's easy. Not only is it easier, but it's empowering. It feels really good. There was a friend who once asked this question that I put in my book as well. Can there be an us without a them? One of the easiest ways to form community is to have an enemy to form it against. So again, community is this thing that we often, there's so many different kinds. But the thing that is going to give us the community that is most important is curiosity. We can find our squads, our tribes, our groups easily if we stick to like-minded people. But what we're going to need from the level that is, altruistic to civic, even to the individual level, where I think most of us are interested in valuing and knowing truth. And I think most of us kind of know that we can't access it by ourselves. And I think most of us also know that if we only surround ourselves with people who share our instincts, we're also going to share our blind spots. And so it's not just good for our civic and social being. It's good for our own individual being to challenge ourselves by daring to ask questions, to challenge the assumptions that are floating around out there about them. So that's what we have to do. We have to build those bridges. And it doesn't mean everybody has to build the same bridges. It doesn't mean that somebody has to drop everything they're doing and build the longest, hardest bridge they can imagine, the one that scares you, the one that makes you hate me for saying any of this. You don't have to build that bridge.
Yeah.
But can you build a smaller one? Can you build a shorter one? Yes, you can. You absolutely can. So this is a large problem, and there are so many on-ramps toward the solution, and all it takes is for each of us to take one step toward being more curious. And we can talk about what that might look like, but I really want to emphasize that, believe it or not, curiosity can be fun. It does not have to be terrifying, even when it comes to political division.
Yeah. I find it interesting that you talk about community and community being potentially difficult, because the moment you bring many people together, you bring many opinions together, and you also bring the various programming together of the various people. And in this podcast, I'm really interested in spiritual awakening because I feel like what's happening in that moment is there is a letting go of the programming, or a realization that the programming is not equal to self, and therefore there is something bigger. And when we can step out of that, then we can start relating on a different level. Then we actually start realizing that our values are actually quite similar. We all sort of want the same. We want to be happy. We want to be free. We want to be able to have all the things we need: love, safety, and belonging, and all those things. And so having that curiosity is really a great way to start approaching that. When I went into my first spiritual mystery school training many, many years ago, probably around the same time that we met, the person who was leading that group, she said, I encourage all of you to hold curiosity. And it was really new to me at the time because I was really opinionated. I knew exactly who I was and what I wanted and what I didn't want and why I didn't like certain people who didn't like the same things that I did. And it humbled me in a way because we had to practice that. And I felt like that was a really important spiritual practice at the time.
I love that. I love that you use the word practice, because I run into this idea that curiosity is a personality trait. Some people are more curious and some people are less curious, but it's a muscle. And the more you use it, the easier it comes. And using it in situations that are difficult builds the muscle to use it even more in situations that are difficult. But like you said, there is something really profound in that idea that, and maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, so please correct me, our convictions, our certainties, maybe even aspects of our identities, none of these things are necessarily permanently ourselves. And there's a way in which, if you let the ideas in your head breathe, if you relax your grip on them, not because you don't believe them or you don't think they are right, but because you want to explore, then the world becomes bigger for you. And there's a real deep pleasure in that. And not only that, you said we all want the same things, and one of the things we all want is to be free. It's so liberating to not be afraid of learning something new. It's so unbelievably liberating to look forward to being wrong in the process of that learning. But again, you have to kind of do battle with the signals out there about what we need to be attached to for our own safety.
Yeah, I think that's all just so important to remember that. And what you said about expanding the world versus shrinking the world, at least that's what I got out of that, right? If we are curious, we have the ability to expand the world. And I'm putting it through the astrological filter again. In astrology, the sign of Gemini tends to be really curious. It's the bee flying around and going to all the different flowers and just checking everything out. That's sort of the energy of the curiosity in Gemini. And I love that. And the Gemini people I know, they tend to be really curious. They ask a lot of questions. They tend to have a lot of friends. And yeah, they're just really open-minded. And it could definitely be that certain people are more open-minded than others. But once you start getting siloed into these different groups, then it starts getting really difficult. And I feel like before we jump into the meat of this conversation, which is going to be about spiritual awakening, I would love for you to give our listeners a little bit of information about your SOS framework that you have, which is about sorting, othering, and siloing, because these three concepts are so big. And I know several people who do no longer talk with their parents or have really difficult situations with their parents, which I know is something you're trying to bridge and not do. I personally have a couple of friends who voted for a different presidential candidate than I did, and I refuse to not be friends with them. And I think the reason I managed to do that is because of you. Because I listened to one of your podcasts right before the election. It's like, in this time, talk to the people who think differently than you. I eventually decided no longer to talk politics with them because I'm not well versed in politics to begin with, so I don't have really good counter arguments. But we just focus on what we have in common, which is our friendship and all the beautiful things we do. But to come back to my original questions, to come back to your SOS framework, I love it so much. And if you could explain that, that'd be amazing.
Of course. First, I have to say kudos to you for that, because it is very hard. It was very hard around the election. And, we don't all need to be wonks about politics or talk about it all the time. But in times of high anxiety, it's really important to talk about it, not necessarily to argue the points, but almost to ensure that there is still connection. And it sounds like that was in your heart as you did that. So I have to say that. The SOS is my answer to the question, how did we get so divided? Sorting, othering, siloing are three very natural dynamics of humanity that can be good, can be bad, but they're there. So sorting is the tendency to want to be around people who are like us. We talked about when communities are easy. Communities give us meaning and purpose. How do we make friends? Usually pretty organically when we stumble into people who share something with us. They're fun to be around. There's a comfort. These things are not bad. They're great. What ends up happening when you take that concept really broadly is in so many aspects of our lives, we want to be around people who are like us, and we don't want discomfort. So you can see that large across the map of the United States, where politically blue zip codes are getting bluer, politically red zip codes are getting redder. There's very understandable reasons why that's happening. This law in this state makes me want to live in another state, things like this. Then there's othering. And that is the distance we put between us and them. When I was doing research for the book, I was really shocked to learn how little meaning needs to be in a difference for human beings to start subtly discriminating against each other. There's all these experiments that show the differences don't have to have any meaning at all. Like in an experimental condition, they might just decide you're group A and you're group B. And people in group A just feel an affinity to other people in group A for no reason, right? So when the difference does carry meaning, when there's a story, they hurt us. They're still hurting us. They don't understand us. They think they're better than us, whatever it is. Then, oh boy, some of the greatest sins in humanity come from othering. And then there's siloing, which is where, for me, technology comes into play so much. We have so many ways to make sure that we are only surrounded by voices we approve of. And with our phones, we can make sure that we only subscribe to those voices. We become, we're siloed. We only hear stories from those on our sides. Now, that does not mean that we are not exposed to ideas from, quote unquote, the other side. But what it does mean is that when those ideas come to us, it's through layers and layers of judgments from those on our side. That's what that means. So we have to ask a lot of questions about what SOS adds up to. And one of the things I think it adds up to is this sense where our worldview is narrowed, but we are convinced that we see enough of it. That's what it all adds up to. Because when you're in those silos, everything's great. Not only is everything great, but you start to think over time, we are right. There's nothing else to learn out there. They're all crazy. They're stupid. They're evil. We're on the right side. And so I need to stay safe by staying here. There's a researcher, Cass Sunstein from Harvard University, I cite in the book, and he's still studying all this, but he's one of many researchers that has pointed out what happens to opinions when they are shared only with people who have the same opinions. We tend to radicalize our opinions. By radicalize, I mean we become more purely about that opinion. So if I only discuss an opinion with people who share my opinion broadly, we will want to take more radical steps in favor of our opinion, and we will tend to be even more certain and confident that our opinion is the correct one. Now, I'm not a relativist necessarily, right? So, of course, there are some ideas that are better than others. But how do we know? How do we really know? Can we know by never generously interacting and trying to understand where other people are coming from? Can we know, while so many of us are kind of in these misperceptions and exaggerations that social research keeps demonstrating, and where no matter how educated you are or how well read you think you are, you're not immune. So the default settings of our society keep us trapped in this cycle of SOS. And we need to take really meaningful, intentional steps. But like I said in the beginning, they can be small ones to break that cycle.
Yeah. So what I'm really hearing is that we feel just way more comfortable being around the people that have the same opinions because it's just easier and familiar, and we just naturally tend to do that. And in your book, you're also talking about how historically that actually made sense, because in a tribal setting, many, many hundreds or thousands of years ago, when people were with equal people, they would be more safe because they had the same values. And so that actually helped at the time. Versus today, with a global world where people can travel and move anywhere, and we live in cities, that really doesn't work anymore. So I feel like in many ways, the way evolution happened was so fast over the last 100, 200 years that some of the core principles of who we are don't really work. Even when you think about food and sugar, we didn't have access to a lot of sugar, maybe some berries here and there, a fruit from a tree in a certain season, but that was it. Versus now we have access to all of that. So the programming or the code in the physical body is still there, but the society has changed so much.
Absolutely.
And then the other thing that's coming up for me is also confirmation bias, which again, social media has really started leaning strongly towards that. If we are interested in something and we research it, the algorithm will give us more like that, because obviously they want as many people on the social networks as possible, so they give them what they think they want.
Yes.
And somebody just told me the other day that AI is programmed for confirmation bias too. So the more we ask it about a certain thing, the more it gets to know us, the more it gives us exactly that. And I played with it the other day and kind of went down the rabbit hole in my little confirmation bias until it got so radically extreme that I said, please delete your memory. And here's some information from the opposite that I also believe in, and I would like for you to change that. I did an experiment after somebody explained to me that that's what happened to them. And that was a big eye-opener. Before we continue, I want to take a moment to say thank you for being here and for listening. Your support for this podcast means more than you can imagine. If this conversation is landing for you, I'd love to invite you to go a little deeper with us. You can sign up for the Wake Up Protocol newsletter at thewakeuprotocol.com. That's where we share tools, bonus insights, and discounts on upcoming offerings to help you integrate these conversations into your own life. And if someone comes to mind while you're listening, someone who needs to hear this message right now, please share this episode with them, or even 3 people who feel like they're standing at the edge of something big. This podcast grows through word of mouth, and your sharing truly helps this work reach the people it's meant for. Okay, let's return to the conversation. So again, right, we did the social media thing, the algorithms, and now the AI is adding even more to that. So when you think about what's happening with technology, and in a time where people need to come together, and yet technology is dividing people and the algorithms are dividing people, I know you're an optimist. How do you see all of that?
Oof. I think there's 2 major types of separateness that technology can cause that we need to be very wary of. One you've referred to and is more obvious, I think, and that is separation and division by belief and by content, where, well, if I believe that the earth is flat, I can go online and I can find people who agree with me, because geography is no longer a boundary and technology can bring us together and we can build a beautiful community of purpose and meaning, right? But maybe not necessarily around the best ideas. And so just take that and spread it to so many other systems of belief. But there's another way that technology is driving a wedge that worries me a lot more and that I think is less obvious to people. And it really, to me, comes down to whether we invite ourselves to the messy and necessary interaction with other human beings. When I go to the airport, my favorite food, I travel a lot, comes from those fresh fridge machines. And so I don't go to the counters anymore. When I go to the grocery store, the checkout lines are faster at those machines. I don't say hi. There's a guy, Tony, who used to give my kids gifts at the grocery store. I don't see him anymore. I don't know where he is. That's just there. With AI, I've talked with ChatGPT, and I have had the thought, this is the most empathetic listener I think I've ever experienced.
Right?
Mm-hmm. And that's lovely. And then it's scary.
Mm-hmm.
Because ChatGPT is not like me. ChatGPT is not another messy, imperfect human being with its own experiences and paths through the world. I mean, I suppose you could think of it maybe a little bit in parallel. It's got a memory, it's here to serve. But there's something about that servility. There's something about the kind of sycophantic default voices that AI tends to use, anything from my master. There's something about that I'm afraid is beginning to substitute for real relationships. And look, when I say that, there's a voice in my head going, you Luddite. That's what people used to say about social media. You knew they were wrong. Why are you so confident now? And the truth is, I'm not that confident, but it is a fear and it is a concern. And I am open and I am curious.
Mm-hmm.
But, I will tell you a line that once it occurred to me, I realized I believe very deeply, and maybe you'll see the connection. And the line is, the root of all evil is distance between people. I just believe that.
The root of all evil is distance between people. Wow. That's really, really powerful. Yeah. So how can we start bridging that? How can we start seeing each other for who we truly are? Humanity is so complicated. And the more of these conversations I have, the more I realize that there's all this programming that's happening. And if we're lucky to have some sort of a pivotal moment, or it could even be slower to have some sort of a awakening that allows us to see that the programming is not ours, and to start reflecting on who we truly are, and then to see if that seed of who we are is also reflected in the seed of somebody else, and see what that can grow into. Yeah. That's what I'm starting to see.
Can I ask you a question? Absolutely. When you say the programming is not ours, I think I know what you mean. But even still, I may not. And I also just really want to hear you unpack that.
Yeah, thanks for asking that. I mean, I could go into all kinds of theories here, but what I'm really seeing is that I think we get born into this world as pure entities. Our soul gets born into the body and we're just pure. And then we're like a sponge, open to receive any kind of information that is being told to us, and we slowly start to change. If you look in the eyes of a newborn, and you have children, you know what I'm talking about. You see the soul in their eyes. It is so pure. It is a direct reflection of source. And then slowly, slowly, they become 3 years old, 4 or 5. Around age 7, they start wearing a mask because they start realizing that who they are in society and who society wants them to be might not necessarily match. And that's when they start playing around with trying on different masks. Who am I? Which mask gives me the most love, gives me the most connection, gives me the most clout, whatever it is that you're looking for, gives me the most love, safety, and belonging. And then you start putting those on and start losing yourself. And so to me, that's the programming, your caregivers, your friends, society that we're growing up with, depending on what country, what socioeconomic level you're born into, all of that. And to me, that's the programming. And then the question is, how far do we take that into our lives? Do we continue adding mask upon mask upon mask, or are we starting to take that off?
Yeah.
I was sharing how I felt like I wasn't being seen for who I am. And some of my spiritual teachers said, are you still wearing a mask, or are you actually showing people who you really are? And for me, it was terrifying to show who I was, because I'm a deeply spiritual human being who worked in the tech industry, in a very masculine industry. And so I just wore the tech mask, and the spiritual people, which were my people, And again, my people were going into that siloing and sorting and othering again. But the people that I really truly felt see me for who I am, and the people that when I was shining my light didn't feel dimmed by it, those people didn't see me because I wore a mask. And then the people that I thought saw me didn't see me either because I wore a mask. And so I didn't actually show them who I was. And the interesting thing is now that I took my mask off and with this podcast is completely off, I'm completely out of the spiritual closet. I have this beautiful gift of sharing with people who I really am and what it is that I love to do. And I was so worried that a lot of people would be like, oh my God, I'm not interested in this. And that's definitely possible and that exists and I don't care about that. But what's happening, even the people that I thought were judgmental are coming to me and are curious. And again, that curiosity is what's so important. And so maybe just by taking off the mask, we invite curiosity to others.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So much in that. I love that. I thought about, I have a lot of books on my shelf that I haven't read yet. There's just a list, but there's one by a guy named Todd Rose called Collective Illusions. And he's done all this research about beliefs that one person thinks everyone else believes, and so they better believe it too, or pretend to believe it. But then it turns out nobody believes it. Nobody actually believes it. We're all putting on a mask, and there is no real thing we're imitating. This happens. This happens. And an incurious society lets it happen because we put, like you said, love, safety, and belonging, so important. It's so important to us. It's hard to put anything above it, and it's hard to put it at risk, which is why curiosity takes courage.
Yeah. And so there's another 3 words that I really, really deeply believe in that we all have in ourselves and we can access if we learn how to take off the mask, and it is to be authentic, present, and free. And that's something that I always saw in you from day one. You had that. You're like, yeah, I am authentically me. I am present. I'm here. I'm listening. And I'm free to make the choices I want and also to have the boundaries that I need to really be clear about what I do let in and what I don't.
Well, I have to say, I received that with some skepticism because when you and I met, I was in my early 30s. And when I look back at that time, I feel like I was less authentic, less free, and less present, for sure. Maybe that means that all these things have just gotten better. Maybe it's just a story I tell myself, and it's not all that connected to reality because Lord knows our own memory can get so, just beaten about by the winds of everything. But I guess I have to allow myself to believe that maybe you're right, and some of that actually was there.
Yeah. I definitely saw it in you from the very beginning. There are several people I've worked with over the years where I'm just like, yeah. And it's a continuum as well, right? It's not something that we're mastering it. There's no way of mastering authenticity or presence or freedom. It can grow and grow and grow. And then
exactly,
we die.
Yeah. And we just don't have that much time. I'm 42 right now, and I love science fiction. There's a book called The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And in that book, the number 42 is kind of the punchline of a joke. And it's a large mission. It's basically the answer to the question of the meaning of life. But nobody knows the question. But the answer is 42. Anyway, that's a long-winded way of saying I've looked forward to this year and I've wondered what it has in store for me. And it has felt like a year of experiencing freedom and ensuring more freedom. But deeper than that, understanding better what that even means, what freedom even means. The other day I was reading something that was saying that freedom can be more terrifying than keeping yourself in a prison in your own mind.
Absolutely. Because we don't know yet what that looks like. And if we don't have a map for it and we don't have anyone to follow who can actually plow the path, it can be absolutely terrifying. I'm having this conversation constantly with my friends. It's like, we kind of want to wake up, like really wake up. What does it even mean to wake up? And it's absolutely terrifying. Like, what does that mean? Who are we going to be when we don't know what that's going to be? And so we're all holding back in many ways. So I answered your question, and I knew you were going to ask me a question.
Curious.
Programming. And I'm really curious to learn from you how you see spiritual awakening. And again, some people call it a life quake or whatever you want to call it. But what would you say about what that is?
So we just talked about being authentic and being free. I have been looking forward to this conversation with you because I knew you would ask that. And I knew that more things in my mind and heart would marshal toward a meaningful answer because I'm here with you.
Mm-hmm.
The spiritual piece of me, I would say, has been largely asleep for a long time. And in the last 2 to 3 years has started to move. I don't know what to call it. Spiritual awakening makes sense to me, you know. For me, it's been like a dawning, like a slow dawning where I realize that there's more light coming in and I like what that light is showing me. And so I want to do more things to let even more of that light come in. And what does that mean? And it turns out it doesn't mean trying to achieve more things. And it doesn't mean trying to impress more people. And it doesn't mean some of the stuff I was conditioned to think it should mean. It means something very different. And one of the core things it appears to mean is that I have to aim my curiosity within. And as much as I talk about the political divide and how scary it can be to get curious about someone on the other side, there are moments that I think it's even scarier to get curious about yourself. So that's been a journey, but such a fulfilling one. Mm-hmm. Before, when you said your programming is not your own, there's an opportunity to program yourself. But in order to program yourself, you need to know your own code. And to know your own code, you have to look really deep. And you have to be able to admit when your programming has this pattern of leading to bad outcomes. And then you have to face guilt, shame, responsibility. And you have to somehow not deflect the feelings that are so uncomfortable. You have to sit with that. I've found that holding curiosity in those moments is super great. Because holding curiosity basically means I can't even believe the thought I should be ashamed all the way. Should I? Let me look at that shame. Let me sit and look at it. I do daily meditations and I have all these visualizations. Recently, I don't know, last few months or something, I have visualized when I meditate and I run into a negative feeling, right? My visualization is, for whatever reason, I can't explain it. It's like I go into these rooms and they're like almost like classrooms or almost like childcare. And I go in and maybe there's impatience. Impatience has been a really big one for me lately. And I'll go into a room and I will see impatience, and impatience will be a child. And I will see her. She won't look like me, but she'll be a child. And she will look impatient. And maybe it's the mother in me, but what I do is I sit and I look at her being impatient, and then I come toward her, and then I show a face of sort of receiving her, and then we'll hug. And in the hug, the image changes, and I realize that I am her and she is me. I am that impatience. And somehow doing this with any negative emotion, it's like something inside me is reconciled. I'm able to accept that that's there. You talked about being present. It's there. I don't need to feel shamed for it. I don't need to shame myself. It's there. Let me look at it. Let me get curious about it. And just by sitting and looking at that child, little thoughts start to come in about the patterns that led to this being here. And it becomes so natural and organic that it's almost like I'm watching the movie of my life. Not that I'm trapped in it, but I'm watching it and it makes sense. And then I just discover some agency. And instead of, the step that I can take to be less impatient, being laden with judgment of myself, it just becomes a concrete and practical step.
That's so beautiful. Just really that patience and holding curiosity and just kind of seeing things for what they are without judgment, that release of judgment. And also the fact that you talked about allowing the light to come in. I believe we are all so magical and so full of light. And somehow we're being told that we're not. and then we dim it and we don't even believe in it anymore. And so once we can start opening up to that again, imagine everybody could completely fill themselves up with light again.
Right.
And also feel lighter. Right? It's not as heavy, light.
And don't you love that those words are the same word?
Mm-hmm.
Light as in weight and light as in illumination.
Yeah.
It's even spelled the same way.
Yeah. I had a realization about the word damn. To damn someone, it's obviously not a very positive word, and it's spelled differently from a dam, that's damming water. But I was thinking, what if we damn someone, if that just means to dam the flow, and we're blocking the flow, we're no longer allowing that. And so if we stop using that word and just allowing the flow to happen, then we can just naturally express our truth, our beauty, our light, our love, our consciousness in the world.
I love that. Yeah, that's really cool. It's very hard. When I first met you, I know for a fact, I remember, I was a more judgmental person, meaning judgments of others would come more quickly, and I would believe them and I would indulge them. And I used to think back then that if I didn't indulge judgments, I would end up a dishonest person, or someone who could be walked over, or someone who wouldn't call a spade, and all these things. But in a weird way, I think I've seen kind of the opposite. It's so strange. The other day in my, ready for a cliche, yoga class, well, of course he goes to yoga. It's hot yoga, actually. Go to hot yoga. But every now and then the teacher, Becca, who I love, she's so great, she'll say something during class, basically beginning with, I ran into this quote the other day, and it was very powerful for me, and I thought I'd share it with you. And the quote she shared that I wrote down right after class was, what if success was measured by the amount of safety people feel in your presence?
Oh, wow.
Right? And I was like, yeah, because I've become somewhat addicted to the feeling that someone is being truthful with me. I think it's so powerful. I want to push everything away to be in that with that person. And then I want to share it back as a gift, if I can. When somebody gives me that gift of receiving me all the way, it makes my whole day brighter, my whole week brighter. It itself illuminates me. We're talking about a dawning and about light. David Brooks has a book called How to Know a Person. And he talks about the difference between illuminators and diminishers, which is kind of what you were saying. So I think I missed, when I was younger, how judgments, whatever their content, whatever their, I believe this is more right, so I'm going to judge you for having a more wrong idea. Okay, we can talk about that, right? But whatever their evaluative content, if they diminish a person, what good is that?
Yeah. What good is that? Why would we do that? To make ourselves feel better, in contrast.
Right. There's ways to deliver criticism and to disagree that do not diminish.
So I want to steer back to some of the spiritual concepts as you're saying that. And also, I don't know if you listened to the podcast, the telepathy tapes.
No.
So the telepathy tapes, I think they said it was the #1 podcast in America for a while. It might still be. It's a woman who did research on autistic children, and she discovered that they can read their mother's minds. So these were nonverbal autistic children. Their mothers thought that they were just trapped in a body, and turns out, in a sense, they are trapped in a body because they don't have much awareness of their bodies, but they can tap into the quote-unquote field of consciousness and read their mother's minds. They did all kinds of experiments around that, and they also found out that these kids meet in a place called The Hill. And there's people from all over the country who are geographically located in completely different places, and yet they meet and they know each other and they have conversations there. There's still a lot of skepticism from science, but I personally feel like there's enough evidence that it appears to be true.
Wow.
When I think about telepathy, the beautiful thing about it is you cannot lie, because you don't go in there and tell a story. What they do is they share scenarios with each other. They share experiences in a more holistic way, where they're basically showing an entire experience to an audience or another person. And also when they're mothers, read, for example, they were in two different rooms and the mothers read numbers on books like 375, 582, and it was a 100% accuracy of the daughter who was in a different room writing those same numbers down. And it wasn't when the mother started reading the number that the daughter was able to say the number. It was when the mother saw the number, which means in telepathy, it's very binary. It's either true or it's not, and there is no lying. So that makes me think, wow, how could we evolve to a place where we could become telepathic, where we don't have to make up stories anymore because it doesn't exist and everything was just truth and we were just to share truth? How would that change the world?
Yeah. Isn't that the dream? Wouldn't that be amazing?
Yeah.
It feels to me like something about that is the conquest of fear. It just feels like that's the work. There's so many layers and layers and layers of fear, within ourselves, how we'll feel about ourselves, how other people will feel about us. It's like you were talking about the 3-year-old and the 7-year-old and the masks we put on it. It all kind of comes back to the same. But I think that is part of the addiction. When I have been in really extraordinary conversations, it feels like, not going to say mind reading, but it feels almost like I can tell what the next thought and sentiment is going to be before it comes out, just because I've become so attuned to that other person in that moment. Something about their face tells me they're about to say something a little uncomfortable and I'm ready. And here we go. I think about this conversation I had when I was a junior in college and I was studying in England, and I had met this group of other Americans from different parts of the country who were also studying abroad. We became very close friends. We'd been to each other's weddings. We're still close. There was one night, English college students go clubbing during the weekdays. I don't understand it, but that's what they do. So that's what we did. And we came home midnight or whatever, and we hung out in my flat, and we talked. And we talked, and we talked, and we got to talking about religion and politics and the deepest things we each valued. And the most incredible moment, I'll never forget the sort of visceral realization as I was looking over Molly's shoulder that the sun was coming up through the window. That's how long we had been talking. That conversation left such a mark on me. And it just feels like we reached this place where nothing was hidden. And in some ways, nothing had to be that deeply explained. Here's the other thing, is that so rarely do we get that gift of somebody witnessing us, but it is so valuable to be witnessed, because when somebody else is sort of listening to me, I am also listening to myself in a very different way than if I'm just talking to myself. It completely changes the game when another human being is also listening. Completely. You get to know yourself better. I just get sad when I think that we might have so many good reasons to do that less and less and less and less and less. Because we know ourselves less, which makes us even less capable of telling the stories that explain us to the world, which, as you said, is not even the ideal. It makes us even less capable to just freaking be with each other.
And then there is AI that's now so highly empathetic that it actually listens better to us than other people.
AI is incapable of courage. AI has no fear. There's no difficulty rating. There's no meaning in the listening. There's an intellectual assistance that's extraordinary. I use ChatGPT all the dang time. It's really great. The other day, my brother-in-law was telling me his close friend does college admissions, and that there was a prospective student who had come in and was asked the question, "So what are your interests?" And the student said, "Hang on a second," went to his phone and asked ChatGPT what his interests were. I am not mocking the student, because look, when I was in college, I was pretty darn insecure. And if I thought that there was something that was going to get me a better answer, I'd probably use it. But it's what I want to highlight in that anecdote is the removal of the self from the self.
Yeah.
The lack of trust of the self to the self because of a machine that can do it better.
And I can relate to that on an even on a human level. I remember when I was going to my first spiritual gatherings and somebody was selling some jewelry and somebody was like, "Oh, Nadia, you should pick out this. That's so you." And I didn't know yet what my new quote unquote identity was going to be because I was in this big time of transition. Then I asked another friend and said, "Do you think that's me?"
Yeah.
Looking back, I'm like, wow, that's so silly because I just wanted some affirmation from others to tell me where my direction was going towards and if they actually agreed with me or approved. I didn't even really have an opinion whether or not I liked that thing. Turns out I ended up buying a piece of jewelry that I ended up never wearing. They didn't know what was truly me because that
Fascinating.
quote unquote spiritual jewelry really isn't my style. My skin is way too light to wear the kind of stuff that beautiful dark skinned people can wear. So that never worked for me. I ended up gifting it. Coming back to the awakening, I know you've had a few experiences that sort of are aha moments in your life that turned you into the person that you are today. One that you can think of right now that you would like to share?
You know, one that just popped into my head was on my wedding day. So lots of people had come in from all over, including Mexico, where I'm from. Something like 17 of my extended family members came.
Mm-hmm.
It was raining, which I had worked really hard to avoid. We scheduled the wedding for the second least likely weekend for rain in Seattle's calendar, but rain came. And I think I remember that morning seeing the rain out the window and something in me just said yes. Something in me just said, you know what? Today, we're not going to say no to what is. Today, we're not going to say no to the world. We're going to say yes.
Mm-hmm.
And so we took pictures at Gasworks Park. The Blue Angels were flying overhead. My meticulously done hairdo was undone. And I kept saying yes.
Mm-hmm.
And there was this moment at the actual ceremony where the pastor was giving a prayer. And I'm secular, mind you, but there's more we can speak to that. The pastor was giving a prayer, and I closed my eyes, and what I felt, I had never consciously felt before in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I felt, and because the pastor was talking about everybody being here for me and Jason and the blessing of love and all this, it's like I felt each of the souls of the people there and the love that they were all feeling in that moment. And I was so in awe. I was overwhelmed. It was as if it was being sent my way and I was just swimming in it. I was awash in it. And it was beautiful. And I just never felt anything like that. And I remember emerging from that going, could I get that feeling again?
Mm-hmm.
Just around like any people? Could I do that again? And I think that opened a door for me to kind of understand a little bit about why I've been so fascinated by people for so long. In the book, I talk about I became a journalist in part because people are just so interesting. They're such bottomless mysteries to me. I started off being such a shy kid that one of those programs that you send a sort of questionnaire to, it was Johns Hopkins, and they tell you, here's the careers that you could and couldn't do. I had kind of at the bottom in a footnote said like, I don't know, maybe communications. And something in that report was like, you're not cut out for communications. Your personality is not really there. And something shifted in me, and my fascination with people became more powerful than my fear of much of anything. And then through journalism, because journalism at its core, and when it's, I think, well practiced, right, is a total practice of curiosity. And there's a lot of folks who have lost trust in that, and sometimes for good reason, but it's a total practice of curiosity. So I did that over and over and over and over again. And spiritually, I think that kind of laid the groundwork for these series of beliefs that kind of came up. As I was working on the book, I wrote down this phrase and I realized it was true, that I believed it to be true, which is that nobody is beyond understanding, that nobody is beyond understanding.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when people would put up barriers, and they still do, well, surely, you know, you wouldn't endorse talking to a person who has done this or who believes that. And I'm like, okay, I may not endorse that for this person at this moment, but would I ever take a Sharpie and cross out a whole person as being eligible for understanding? No, never. So that was fed by a lot of like non-spiritual kind of experiences or experiences that I didn't label as spiritual at the time. But looking back, I think a lot of my interviews were spiritual connections with other people. It was my best interviews, I would forget myself. And I think they would forget themselves. And I think we would just be in this sort of space of exploration that was so open and broad. And there would sometimes be people who didn't realize how interesting they were until I asked questions that made them realize how interesting they were. Do you know what I mean? Because everybody's interesting. That's another conviction I have. Everybody's interesting. We are so bottomless.
Yes.
So I think that door was opened in some ways in my wedding. But like I was telling you before, it's only been the last couple of years that the spiritual thing I've even sort of named as something that I want to dive into.
Yeah. Well, perfect timing to have this conversation now. And I love how you're describing that moment during your wedding where you just felt so connected to everyone, felt that love, and you were completely in the present moment.
Yes.
For me, it was the book The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle that intellectually helped me understand that, but I had never experienced it until I had my first awakening. When I experienced it, just like you, I was like, how can I continue cultivating that? How can I get back to that? Is this even sustainable? And, I'm in and out of it constantly, trying to figure out ways to be in it more often and with people. And, but with people, it's helpful when you become really present and you get really curious and you hold space and start asking questions and allowing them to open up, and then open-ended questions and then follow-up questions. Like one of my favorite follow-up questions is there anything else you want to add?
Yeah.
That's something, we do in coaching or even in this podcast, I do it often. But I start doing it in conversations now where I just listen and then I ask, is there anything else you want to add? And that's something we tend to not do very often in conversation where it's more about, let me talk about me as I am listening to you and trying to figure out what my next response to you is that is telling you more about me. It's like, no, how can we become present? How can we truly listen and get curious again? So I feel like that curiosity is really, during this conversation that we're having, becoming such an important part of, if we hold curiosity, we're allowing things to open up in ways that we cannot expect. And it's the unexpected that's so magical that can happen.
Exactly. And when you're in the present moment, if you're really looking, there's nothing to be certain about, including yourself. What's coming up in you in the middle of a conversation, in that live, raw vulnerability of a real life conversation, is a mystery even to you until you look at it. I mean, these things are unconscious. We can get carried away by our own reactions so easily.
Yeah.
That's that programming that isn't ours. If it's unconscious, if it's a pattern we don't recognize, if we haven't looked at it. So there's just nothing to be certain about. And then bring in another person and woof. I mean, there's really, I'm in the present moment. I'm talking to somebody else. We're talking about something easy. We're talking about something difficult. I don't know what's undergirding what they're saying necessarily, but sometimes the pull is so strong. I'm enjoying the connection with this person. I'm enjoying how they're holding up a mirror to me, and I'm witnessing myself differently. And somehow the miracle of there not being a negative attitude toward that excavation has happened. And then it just seems like, it's like you said before, that there's sort of a truth and a source that doesn't need to be explained. That's just incredible. That's just like the coolest darn thing. It is so cool. I love so much the moments when, and they don't even have to be heavy conversations or particularly profound, when somebody's like, oh, we gotta go. We gotta go. And then it's 15 minutes later and you're still talking, where I've seen so many different kinds of people with completely different personalities, introverts, extroverts, be pulled in by the miracle of real, honest, candid engagement with somebody else that is illuminating them, where they know that they're playing a part in illuminating somebody else. That's a difficult experience to want to end. And I've seen this happen even with what you might label unpleasant topics. Because a lot of the times the unpleasant topics are the ones we're too scared to unpack. So when we find what you might call the safety of a candid, curious context, we're so eager to unpack it. And then it becomes interesting more than it becomes negative. And over time, that interest becomes fascination, which has this positive valence. That I'm fascinated by that thing that I disagree with.
Yeah. I love how much time you have spent in your life contemplating that question about these conversations and humanity and communication with other people, and really becoming an expert at that and taking that to the next level of like, how much more can I let my ego drop away and just become an open vessel to receive, and then in that moment see how I respond. Before I started this podcast, I talked with you, and one of the most important things you said was to not do a scripted kind of questioning, to just kind of see where the conversation goes. I have a few core questions that I want answered because I'm curious how people had a spiritual awakening, but everything around it is now flowing, and it's been really helpful to get that guidance from you. So I want to thank you for that.
Yay. Oh, good. I'm glad that was helpful. Awesome.
And so you said about 2 years ago, you started getting more curious in spirituality. What did that look like for you? Did you have an experience where you like traveled somewhere or got introduced to a different quote unquote religion or way of thinking about it, or what happened?
Yeah. So let's see, it's 2025, 2 to 3 years ago, I would say. One thing that pops to mind is 2022, our 12th wedding anniversary. Me and my husband went to Thailand. The initial reason we went to Thailand was because it was cheaper than France. We had scoped out 2 possible vacations, and the wine vacation in France was crazy expensive. And in Thailand, it looked like we could be kind of like living the royal life for a whole lot less for a week. So we went. But the other reason we did go, and this was a quieter thing in my heart at the time, was that I was very interested in what I had picked up about Buddhism. And Thailand is more than 90% Buddhist. So I thought that would be really cool. I also really hunger for experiences in places that are very different from what I've experienced before. I would much rather go somewhere, that's just that much more sort of foreign to me than not. And Thailand would be that place. It just seems so different. So I was very excited. And boy, I don't even know where to begin. There was something about consideration as a value in that society. There was something about the tradition of young men becoming monks and the reverence folks have for monks. You always give them the seats in the subway. There's a time of the year when you make offerings. Made me so curious. Like, wait, how does this even work? How long has this been going on? Where did this start? What is this all about? And so I got more and more curious about Buddhism in particular. I grew up Catholic, Mexican Catholic, which is its own flavor. Oh boy. And it meant a lot to me while I had it. A couple months after my confirmation, when I received the sacrament of confirmation in the faith, I dropped it like a hot potato, completely lost my faith. And since then, I just really had this sense of, I don't believe there's anything really bigger than us. And I don't believe that anything spiritual is going to get me something meaningful that something intellectual and conceptual couldn't do just as well. And I believed that for a long, long time. And what's interesting is my stepping into Buddhism and getting curious. My husband and I have been doing a reading and study group with a friend. We've been doing meditations. We've since been to India, but it's not even about the place. It's a whole mindset. It's made me more curious about all religions, and it's helping me see the commonality between all of them. And it's helping me, more than anything else, understand that there's a part of truth that the intellect cannot touch, that even scientific studies with their rigor and experiments can't nail down. That aspect of what is meaningful and purposeful and these big questions about life, 42, there's something about truth that I've been missing for a long time. And I think this was accompanied also by, and I'm thinking out loud here, so thank you. It was accompanied by a sense that my getting to know myself would not be a waste of time. My taking a step away from the cult of productivity would have a deliverance to it, that my taking care of myself was not a distraction or a hedonistic, pleasure-seeking side trip. I think I thought all those things at some point, and I think that was stacked on a lot of kind of calcified sense of who I was. And that, whatever judgments or shame that I had been aiming internally were just going to be there forever. And so I just better do the best I can. But I guess this thing that I would call spiritual is the thing that's made me realize that one of the most incredible projects that improves everything is not just to look within in like a navel-gazing way, but when you look within, you realize that there's so many connections everywhere and that there's so much abundance and possibility. It's made me more curious about other religions. I feel like I'm come back to an appreciation of Christianity that I didn't have before. Like I can see some of the things in Jesus' story that were so cool. I went to the West Bank and had dinner with a lot of Muslim families. Islam is gorgeous, and there's so many cool aspects of that. I went to my first Quaker meetings recently, and the reverence Quakers have for silence. They believe that, I don't know if you've heard about Quaker meetings or Friends meetings, but everyone sits. It's basically a group meditation, right? But they believe that if you feel moved to speak, you will stand up and you will speak into that silence. And something of God is in everyone, is what Quakers believe. Anyway, every religion has been getting to the same kind of stuff, the way I see it, for thousands of years.
So what I find so fascinating about how you're explaining this is you're, in a sense, taking the same approach as you take across political divides. You're stepping above it. You become the observer and you say, yeah, there's a blue and the red and there's all these different religions. And yet there's something above it that ties us all together. And that's something that I hear from many people in terms of spirituality. All of a sudden, somebody who might have been really deeply in a certain religion starts to see other religions too, and again becomes that observer in it.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's so cool. Because in religion is all these stories and that have survived the test of time because of how powerful they've become. There's traditions that have formed from those stories. And coming back to our conversation about community, I remember you were saying at one point, it used to be that having sort of small communities that were more alike was more or less okay because you could all share your traditions. But we also know that even if you form a community and you tell yourself, everybody here agrees on everything all the time, you're wrong. There will always be some deviance. The question is, does the community have the resilience to hold it and to grow from it? And some communities with too much baked in tradition that is too solid may end up undermining the spiritual truth that they're trying to uphold by not being curious themselves. And I think that's where religions get into trouble. But I'll also say this. When I was younger, I hated tradition. The concept of it. The whole idea. Wait, you're saying we're doing the same stuff dead people did? Why? Why? It doesn't feel my own. Doesn't feel of my moment. And also sometimes, I don't know, I read my sociology and my history and it seems like it's been oppressive. I want no part of this. And I think I've been growing into a sense of the other side, right? Because I was looking at the dark side of tradition. But the bright, beautiful side of tradition is what it helps preserve, that preserves us. And so I've also been more open to ritual. Because what is ritual if not like a practice that has a commitment? And you talked about you are trying to be more in the moment, not just yourself, but with other people. And so there are some spiritual traditions that have achieved that, where people get together and there's a ritual, there's a practice, there's a set of codes. And some of those are religious and some of those are not. But I used to be so skeptical of all of that. I was the girl who, if I had to go to the bathroom at school, and let's say it was lunchtime, and I'm a kid, and I have to go to the bathroom. But if all the other girls sitting around me decided, we're all going to go to the bathroom, I would hold it. I wouldn't go because I'm terrified of conformity. I'm afraid conformity will undermine who I am. But the truth is that there's a healthy tension there, and there's a healthy tension everywhere. There's a healthy tension between conformity and self-direction. And it really is quite healthy. The chapter in my book about values puts those at odds with each other. And I used to think conformity was bad and self-direction was good. But self-direction that is too isolated is not even going to know itself very well, right? So there's that, John Stuart Mill has that famous quote, "He who knows only his side of the case knows little of that." You have to be open.
Yeah.
Right? And certain norms and cultures beautifully put people together. And they will have their edges and they will have the places where they drop people, and we have to care for that. But boy, do I love the diversity of this planet. You know what actually was my most depressing thought when I was in Thailand? I thought I had gone to someplace so different. And I loved seeing that they weren't that different, but I was also sad. I was like, oh, I guess my need for stimulation and continually finding difference, there's actually an end to that. They weren't that different. And that's both to me because I just love difference and I love novelty. It's like, I think in my 40s, I'm starting to realize like, no, we have a lot of the ingredients we need to live fulfilling lives. And there are a lot of laboratory experiments happening naturally and organically all around the world about what that means and how we hold each other, take care of each other, take care of ourselves, build good societies. And I hope that we keep teaching each other. But that's why I'm so curious. I'm a traveler in many ways. I want to be. But at the same time, you don't even have to venture that far to see like the beautiful variety that exists within my own family, Nadia. The four of us, my two children, so mysterious half the time. Such a project of discovery. I could spend my whole lives just being fascinated by them, let alone everybody else in Seattle or in other countries. There's so much variety everywhere we look. There's so many opportunities to learn. So it's this sense of why keep the world small?
Yeah.
Why feel unsafe if we venture out? And I think that the answer is sometimes there's good answers, right? Well, I'm in a war-torn society. Okay, I get it. Even then, there's something to explore. There's always a way to get more curious.
Yeah.
For the benefit of just about everything.
I've always seen you as an optimist, and you're just reflecting back to me right now how much of that you are and why and how you're cultivating that optimism. You're an author as well. You're a journalist. You're a mother. You're an activist, really, helping bridge. You're a bridge builder in this world of division. I would like to give you a chance to tell our audience how they can find you and if there's anything else you want to share with them.
Yeah. My website's moniguzman.com. Lots of the basics there, including signing up for my newsletter, which I will admit I haven't written in a little bit, but big things are coming on that. I've spent the summer taking stock and making plans, and it's really exciting. My book is I Never Thought of It That Way, How to Have Fearlessly Curious Conversations in Dangerously Divided Times. Available everywhere, your indie bookseller, your Amazon, and everything in between. And then I hosted a podcast called A Braver Way for 2 seasons, and it ended just after the election. And I've done a lot of media projects I'm proud of. I'm not sure that I'm prouder of anything than I am of that project. Some pretty timeless stuff. I was in the episodes interviewing the guests You would think I have already learned everything from my own podcast, and I haven't. I haven't learned everything from my own podcast. I go back and listen to those episodes, and they speak powerfully to me all the time because these people are so brilliant. So check that out, A Braver Way. And it's about equipping people with the skills we need to bridge the political divide. But I'm not just equipping you, I'm equipping myself because nobody can master this. And it's a constant practice.
Thanks for sharing that. And I'll make sure to put the link in the show notes so people can find you there. And just one final question. If you could go back in time and give a message to a younger version of you, what would you tell her?
Relax. I would tell her to relax. Trust herself more. I'd probably try to teach her something about how anxiety can get in the way of freedom. It's not the way to freedom. Yeah, but definitely relax.
Thank you for sharing that. And so it is. What a pleasure to have this conversation with you, Mónica, and just all the wisdom you're sharing and your generous time. I know you're really, really busy. Thank you so much for being on this podcast.
You bet. Thank you, Nadia. This was awesome. You rock. It's so great to talk to you every time I get to. Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Wake Up Protocol. If you like what you heard, share this episode with 3 people who need to hear this message. And if you want to go deeper with this work, head to thewakeupprotocol.com and join our email list. That's where this podcast turns into practice. You'll receive tools to help you integrate what you're hearing, bonus resources, and behind-the-scenes insights we only share with our community, along with early access and special invites. If this podcast helps you feel less alone and more like yourself, the newsletter is where we continue the conversation. And if this is the last thing you hear from us, all we'd like to say is keep going, trust yourself, follow your heart. Until next time, have a safe and happy journey.